Dean Martin died alone on Christmas Day 1995, and the man who spent his final years eating dinner at the same Italian restaurant every night, wearing the same outfit, ordering the same dish, bore almost no resemblance to the entertainer who once knocked the Beatles off the charts. Jeanne, his second wife and the woman he called the love of his life, outlived him by more than 2 decades, only to die 3 weeks after burying their son Ricci in 2016. What follows is the story of how the King of Cool's final chapter became one of Hollywood's saddest endings, and how the tragedy that destroyed him began with a phone call about a missing jet on a snowy mountainside. Understanding how Dean Martin's life fell apart requires understanding what he built, and that story begins in a small Ohio steel town where a barber's son didn't speak a word of English until he turned 5 years old. June 7, 1917 brought Dino Crocetti into the world in Steubenville, Ohio, where his father Gaetano worked as a barber after emigrating from Montesilvano in Italy's Abruzzo region. Angela, his Italian-American mother, raised Dino as their second son, and the boy spoke only Italian until age 5. That language barrier shaped him in ways that would last a lifetime. Grant Elementary School became a place of torment, where other children bullied him for his broken English, and this created an inferiority complex about public speaking that never fully disappeared. Years later, when fame found him, he would explain his reputation for being standoffish. "When Jerry Lewis and I were big, we used to go to parties, and everybody thought I was big-headed and stuck up, and I wasn't. It was because I didn't know how to speak good English, so I used to keep my mouth shut." Before singing ever paid him a dime, Dean worked every job a young man in a steel town could find. Amateur boxing came first at 15 under the name Kid Crochet, earning him between $10 and $25 per match, and his famous quip about that career tells you everything. "I won all but 11. 12 bouts total. Steel mill work followed, along with pumping gas, dealing blackjack at illegal gambling parlors, spinning roulette wheels, and running bootleg liquor during Prohibition." The stage name came later, first as Dino Martini, borrowed from Metropolitan Opera tenor Nino Martini, then settling into Dean Martin by the early 1940s when Cleveland bandleader Sammy Watkins put him on the payroll. October 20, 1941, brought Dean's first marriage, years before anyone knew his name. Elizabeth Ann McDonald, who went by Betty, stood beside him at St. Anne's Church in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, a 19-year-old former athlete who had captained both the lacrosse and hockey teams at her Pennsylvania high school. Cleveland had brought them together while she visited with her father, who was relocating for work, and Dean was singing with the Sammy Watkins Orchestra. Betty bore Dean 4 children over the next 7 years. Stephen Craig in June 1942, Claudia in March 1944, Barbara Gale in April 1945, and Deanna in August 1948. The daughter who would grow up to write about her father. The marriage ended badly in 1948 when Dean fell for another woman, and Betty allegedly learned through a radio broadcast that her husband was sending out wedding invitations to his new wedding while their divorce papers hadn't even been signed. Early 1949 brought the official end, with Dean winning custody of all 4 children. Betty never remarried. San Francisco became her home, and alcoholism became her struggle, so severe that Dean eventually cut off her alimony payments while his second wife raised Betty's daughters. July 7, 1989 brought her death at her San Francisco home at 66 years old, and her ashes were scattered over San Francisco Bay. Jeanne Biegger became the woman Dean left Betty for, and she would become the great love story of his life, even if the ending wasn't what either of them imagined. Dorothy Jeanne Biegger entered the world on March 27, 1927, in Coral Gables, Florida, working as a model and winning the title of Orange Bowl Queen in 1947. Late 1948 brought her to a New Year's Eve performance by Martin and Lewis at the Beachcomber Club in Miami, and that's when everything changed. Years later, she described the moment. "We locked eyes and I knew, we just fell madly in love." September 1, 1949 brought their wedding at the Beverly Hills home of Herman Hoover, owner of the famous nightclub Ciro's, with Jerry Lewis standing as best man. 24 years would pass before the marriage ended, making it by far Dean's longest. Jeanne gave Dean 3 more children. Dean Paul, the one everyone called Dino, in November 1951, Ricci James in September 1953 and Gina Caroline in December 1956, who would later marry Carl Wilson of the Beach Boys. From the outside, everything about Dean Martin's life in the 1950s and 1960s looked golden. The partnership with Jerry Lewis transformed them into the biggest act in entertainment after their debut as a duo on July 24, 1946, at the 500 Club in Atlantic City. That first show bombed so badly the club owner threatened to fire them, but they improvised, threw in some slapstick and vaudeville, and the audience went wild. National television came within 2 years, followed by 16 films together between 1949 and 1956. But here's the thing, Dean always felt like the straight man, underutilized and overshadowed. A 1954 Look magazine cover crystallized the problem by cropping Dean out entirely and showing only Jerry, which prompted Dean's response: "Why the hell should I come in on time? There's not a damn thing for me to do." July 25, 1956 brought the split, exactly 10 years to the day from their first performance together. 20 years of silence followed. Everyone predicted Dean would fail without Jerry. What nobody expected was that he'd become something bigger. The Rat Pack years turned Dean Martin into a legend, with the core group consisting of Frank Sinatra, Dean, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop, calling themselves the Summit, or the Clan, even though the press gave them the name that stuck. Ocean's 11 kept them filming by day in 1960, while they performed together at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas by night. And the marquee might read, "Dean Martin, maybe Frank, maybe Sammy." Dean's solo career reached heights that shocked everyone who had written him off. That's Amore peaked at number 2 in 1953 and earned an Academy Award nomination. But the real triumph arrived on August 15, 1964, when Everybody Loves Somebody hit number 1 and knocked the Beatles' A Hard Day's Night off the top spot. That song remains his only single certified platinum by the RIAA, and the title sits engraved on his tombstone. September 16, 1965 brought The Dean Martin Show to NBC, where it ran for 9 seasons and 264 episodes, peaking at number 8 in the ratings and earning Dean a Golden Globe in 1966 for Best Actor in a Television Series, Musical, or Comedy. The show became famous for something else too. Dean refused to rehearse and showed up only on taping day, which just added to his effortless devil-may-care image. The numbers tell the story of his success. 12 million records sold in the United States, over 50 million worldwide, more than 550 songs across 35 studio albums, and 85 film and television productions bearing his name. December 10, 1969 brought Jeanne's announcement that she and Dean were separating, and the marriage couldn't survive his lifestyle. The divorce finalized in 1972 or early 1973, depending on the source, producing one of the costliest settlements in Hollywood at the time. Dean told his lawyers, "Give her whatever she wants." What she received amounted to approximately $6.5 million, the family home at 601 Mountain Drive in Beverly Hills, several cars, and half the royalties from all the records Dean had made during their marriage. Less than a month after the divorce finalized, Dean married again. Catherine Hahn, a receptionist at a Beverly Hills hair salon catering to celebrities, became his third wife, and she was born in November 1947, making her 26 at the wedding while Dean was 55. 29 years separated them. April 25, 1973 brought a wedding costing approximately $100,000, with flowers flown in from France and 22 cages of white doves released during the ceremony, while Frank Sinatra looked on. Dean also legally adopted Catherine's daughter Sasha. 3 years later, on November 10, 1976, Dean filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, and neither party ever discussed the specifics publicly. The timing suggests something important. After divorcing Catherine, Dean reconciled with Jeanne, and though they never remarried, they remained close for the rest of his life. Catherine Hahn retreated entirely from public life after the divorce and may still be alive today. Her last known public appearance came at Dean Martin's funeral in 1995. September 1976 brought Dean and Jerry Lewis back together after 2 decades of silence, with Frank Sinatra orchestrating the surprise appearance during Jerry's MDA Labor Day telethon. Jerry's response when Dean walked out on stage, "So you workin'?" Dean's variety show had ended in 1974, but the Dean Martin Celebrity Roast specials continued, along with Las Vegas performances and plenty of golf. Time with his children and grandchildren filled his days, and life looked good from the outside. And then came March 21st, Dean Paul Martin, the son everyone called Dino, had lived a remarkable 35 years by the time he became a captain in the California Air National Guard. As a teenager, he formed a pop group called Dino, Desi and Billy, with Desi Arnaz Jr. and Billy Hinchy, scoring Billboard Top 30 hits. Tennis took him to Wimbledon qualifiers at a professional level, and acting brought him a Golden Globe nomination for the 1979 movie Players, plus a starring role in the short-lived series Misfits of Science, alongside a young Courtney Cox. Flying became his passion after joining the Air National Guard in 1980, where his superiors rated him as one of the better pilots in his unit. His first marriage to actress Olivia Hussey produced a son named Alexander, and his second marriage to Olympic figure skater Dorothy Hamill ended in divorce in That Saturday in March brought a routine training flight from March Air Force Base. Takeoff at approximately 1:45 in the afternoon, with 12-year-old Alexander watching his father leave from the base. Captain Ramon Ortiz, 39 years old, sat in the back seat as weapons systems officer aboard an F-4C Phantom II fighter jet bearing the call sign Grizzly 72. Terrible weather awaited them in the form of a snowstorm in progress, multiple cloud layers obscuring visibility, 6 feet of snow already blanketing the ground with another 2 feet falling that night. The aircraft disappeared into scattered clouds at approximately 4,700 feet during a maximum performance climb, and Dean Paul couldn't maintain his position in the 3-aircraft formation. A left turn request followed, acknowledging mountains nearby, and the controller authorized the turn but had to repeat the authorization several times because of radio frequency congestion. 9 to 10 minutes into the flight, radar contact vanished. San Gorgonio Mountain, the peak locals call Old Grayback, received the impact at the 5,500-foot level on the east side of Wood Canyon. The aircraft struck the mountainside inverted at somewhere between 400 and 560 miles per hour, killing both men instantly. Spatial disorientation, also known as vertigo, became the official cause. Dean Paul likely lost his orientation during the steep climb while passing in and out of cloud layers. 5 to 6 days of searching passed before the wreckage turned up on March 26, 1987. April 1, 1987 brought the memorial service at Los Angeles National Cemetery, with approximately 400 people filling the space. Military honors included a 5-gun salute and a missing man formation, 4 F-4 Phantoms flying overhead with one veering off into the heavens, and President and Mrs. Reagan sent a memorial wreath. Frank Sinatra attended. Sammy Davis Jr. attended. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz Jr. and Danny Thomas and Ali McGraw all came to pay their respects. Jerry Lewis showed up unannounced and sat in the back of the church. James Woods delivered the eulogy for his best friend. "Dean was my best friend. He took life very seriously, but he wouldn't let you know it." After the service, Dean Martin reached out to Jerry Lewis with 2 words, "Hey, Jer." According to Lewis, they spoke every day after that until Dean's death. Dean Paul had once declared, just 2 weeks before the crash, "If I were to die tomorrow because of my son Alex, I'd die a happy man. The proudest achievement of my life was to bring Alex into this world." Something else he'd said about flying stayed with those who knew him. "The high I get seeing the sun come up is so great that if I perish, it would have been worth it." Dean Martin never recovered from losing his son. Paul Anka described the change this way: "A huge turning point. After that event in his life, things really changed. He said to me, 'I'm just waiting to die. Just waiting to die.'" Jerry Lewis, speaking in 2005, recalled that Dean became a reclusive alcoholic after his son's death. Rich Little put it simply, once he lost his son, that was the end of him. That was a big part of him that died and never recovered. Author William Keck spent time researching Dean's final years and offered a haunting description. Dean Martin's final years were very, very sad after he lost his son. It was like looking at a candle without a flame. March 1988 brought Frank Sinatra's attempt to pull Dean back into the world, almost exactly a year after Dean Paul's death. The Together Again National Concert Tour launched on March 13, 1988, at the Oakland Coliseum Arena in front of a sold-out crowd of nearly 15,000, with 29 cities planned and 40 performances scheduled. Dean remained deep in grief, accepting the project with indifference, according to those around him, possibly in a desperate attempt to escape the circle of his pain. None of it worked. Lyrics escaped him, his lines came out slurred, and he reportedly flicked a lit cigarette into the Oakland audience. At one point during the tour, he asked Sinatra on stage, "Frank, what the hell are we doing up here?" 5 or 6 shows into the tour, Dean quit, officially citing a kidney condition. Liza Minnelli replaced him, and the tour became the ultimate event. Sinatra's fury reportedly manifested when he pitched an entire plate of spaghetti at Dean's head. Communication between them dried up in the years following, with reconciliation coming over dinner just months before Dean's death, a meal that apparently included a bread roll fight. The daily routine of Dean Martin's final years carried a heartbreaking monotony. La Famiglia, his favorite Italian restaurant in Beverly Hills, saw him almost every night, always wearing the same outfit of navy pants and a light blue shirt, always ordering Clam's Casino, always eating alone. William Keck described what witnesses observed. He would just let the clam juice drip down his shirt. It was like looking at a wax figure that was barely moving around. Deanna, his daughter, confirmed the isolation. He didn't want to have a lot of people around him. He was perfectly happy being alone at a restaurant. When she joined him for meals, he'd tell her, "Well, sure, just no chit-chat. I don't mind the chit, it's the chat." Jeanne Martin, his second wife, often occupied a nearby table, having reconciled as companions, though they never remarried. She understood him in ways no one else could. June 1990 brought Dean's last Las Vegas shows at Bally's Hotel. His final public reunion with Jerry Lewis happened on his 72nd birthday in 1989, and by 1991, he had unofficially retired from performing. Final television appearances came at the end of 1989 and 1990. Sammy Davis Jr.'s 60th anniversary celebration in December 1989, followed by Frank Sinatra's 75th birthday special in December 1990. September 1993 brought a lung cancer diagnosis from doctors at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center after a lifetime of heavy smoking. Dean refused the surgery that could have prolonged his life. Cigarettes finally stopped after the diagnosis, but the damage couldn't be undone, with his liver and kidneys failing. 76 years had taken their toll. According to those close to him, Jeanne encouraged him not to worry about facing death, telling him to look at it as the chance he longed for, to be reunited with their son Dean Paul. December 25, 1995 brought Dean Martin's death at 3:30 in the morning at his home at 511 North Maple Drive in Beverly Hills. 78 years old. Acute respiratory failure resulting from emphysema claimed him. Household staff reported that in the hours before his death, he'd been watching television and drinking red wine late into the night. The maid heard him coughing and hacking, but didn't think it unusual given his lung cancer and smoking history. Longtime manager Mort Viner announced the death to the world. December 28, 1995 brought the funeral at Pierce Brothers Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery. A private service attended by Shirley MacLaine, Don Rickles, Bob Newhart, Angie Dickinson, and Sid Charisse. Barbara Sinatra came to represent Frank. Frank Sinatra himself couldn't face attending, too distraught to be there. Jerry Lewis spoke tearfully. A tuxedo dressed Dean for burial in the Sanctuary of Love section at Westwood in an above-ground crypt 3 rows up from the bottom on the north wall, near Marilyn Monroe, Natalie Wood, and Burt Lancaster. His epitaph reads, "Everybody loves somebody sometime." Las Vegas dimmed the strip's lights in his honor, an extremely rare tribute for the city he'd helped define. Frank Sinatra released a statement, "Dean was my brother, not through blood, but through choice. Good times and bad, we were there for each other." Approximately $30 million represented Dean Martin's estate value at the time of his death. His Beverly Hills home sold for $1.35 million in 1998, and his Palm Springs property brought $205,000 in 1996. Deanna later wrote that his final will bore a date just 11 days before he died, and that the original will had disappeared and was never found. Her words, "I can't imagine him wanting to make such radical changes a few days before he died. I don't believe for 1 minute that he truly understood what was going on." The losses didn't stop with Dean. February 16, 2001 brought the death of his daughter Claudia, the second child from his first marriage to Betty, who lost her battle with breast cancer at 56 years old. August 3, 2016 claimed his son Ricci, the second child from his marriage to Jeanne, at his Utah home at 62. And then, just 3 weeks later on August 24, 2016, Jeanne Martin died at her Beverly Hills home at 89 years old from cancer. Jeanne had outlived Dean by more than 20 years without ever remarrying, and she lost 2 of her 3 children in the end. Dean Paul in 1987, Ricci in 2016. 21 days separated Ricci's death from her own. Jerry Lewis once described Jeanne this way: "She was the best thing, next to me, that ever happened to Dean." Westwood Memorial Park received Jeanne's remains, joining Dean and Dean Paul in death. 4 of Dean Martin's 8 children survive as of this recording. Craig Martin, his eldest son, built a career as a television producer and now moves through his early 80s. Gail Martin, the singer, approaches 80. Deanna Martin, who keeps her father's memory alive through her own singing career and her memoir, navigates her mid-70s. Gina Martin, who married Carl Wilson of the Beach Boys, occupies her late 60s. And Sasha, the daughter Dean adopted when he married Catherine Hahn, also survives. When people asked Dean Martin how he wanted to be remembered, his answer carried characteristic humility. "I want to be remembered as a damn good entertainer. Nothing spectacular. I want them to think he was a nice guy, he did pretty good, and we loved him." Deanna offered a more complicated assessment of her father. Was he a good father? No, he wasn't a good father. But he was a good man. The public Dean Martin, the one with the drink in his hand and the song on his lips, the one who turned everything into effortless charm, always existed partly as an act. His son Dean Paul once confirmed that the booze his father appeared to drink on stage was actually apple juice. But the grief ran real and deep. 8 years separated losing his son from losing his own life. The man sitting alone at La Familia, with clam juice dripping down his shirt, existed just as truly as the legend. Dean Martin won a Golden Globe, earned a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, and holds 3 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame for movies, recordings, and television. Everybody Loves Somebody entered the Grammy Hall of Fame in 1999. Route 7 through his hometown of Steubenville, Ohio, became Dean Martin Boulevard. Industrial Road in Las Vegas transformed into Dean Martin Drive. Every June, Steubenville holds a Dean Martin Hometown Festival. But the ending nobody would have written for the King of Cool remains the ending he received. Dean Paul's death hollowed him out, and the man who brought laughter to millions spent his final years barely moving, barely speaking, waiting. "I'm just waiting to die," he told Paul Anka. "Just waiting to die." Christmas Day 1995 delivered what he'd been waiting for. And if Jeanne spoke truth, if what awaited him on the other side was a reunion with his golden boy, then maybe after all those years of grief, Dean Martin finally found some peace.